Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Blender Basics. I'm here today for low poly modeling. So this one's going to be a little bit different than the other tutorials I've shown you so far, to whereas I'm going to show by starting to show you guys an object at the beginning of this tutorial, and the idea is that you'll watch this through twice. Or you can watch it through once and see how you do with it, but the idea is that I'll show you an object like this table I have here, very simplistic, and the idea is that you will create this table using simple low poly modeling techniques that are found in Blender, and then I'm going to show you how to make the table so that way if you didn't make it right or didn't do it correctly, you'll see how I made it and then improve your own skills into practice. So take a second to crack at this table here. Just as a word of advisory and a hint, it's actually comprised of 4 different objects. You could make this from one, but this tutorial is going to show you how to make it from 4 different ones. And it is 5 different ones. It's 5 different objects in this table. So go ahead and take a crack at that, and then I will show you how to make it. Alright, for those of you who tried to make it, I will show you now how I made this table myself. So I'm going to move this guy out of the way, and first thing I'm going to do is actually going to join this together. There's actually 5 different objects, and I'm going to right click and join to make them all one. So we have now one table object to make it easy to move. So move this over here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and start making a table. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do Shift A to add a object in. I'm going to add a cube. And then from there, I'm gonna do a little quick here, so bear with me. I'm going to then click S to scale, and I'm going to click Z to go into the Z axis and scale down like this. About that flat's fine. I'm then going to use the cursor up here to change the perspective to the Z. I'm going to hit S again to scale, and X to scale on the X axis, which is the red line across the screen there. And make it about that big there, and then do again S and then Y. So this is going to scale on the Y axis now. I'm going to increase this out to about halfway across, so about a block and a half on the grid there. And then from there I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera back using the mouse wheel. I'm going to use the move tool then to move this up, but instead of dragging it up like I normally could, I'm actually going to go into the transform, which is down here. You can see is in this little object down here for the cube. I'm going to go on the Z, and I'm going to take it up to about 2, and that'll automatically move it up to where I want it to be. Now that we have our tabletop there, I'm going to go ahead and then hit Shift A to add another cube in. And now we have this little guy here. I'm going to use S to scale down. About that size is fine, and go maybe a little smaller. And then I'm going to then use this little blue arrow to move him on up. And move right up to the surface there of this one, of our other cube we've made. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move him in the position I want him to move him in. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into the Z view, and I'm going to actually go to this wireframe for the viewport shading up in here. And you can see now we have a little bit of a grid view. I'm going to move this over to where he's 2 rows of these guys away from the side on both the bottom and the side here. You can see it's not perfect on mine, but you can fix yours if you'd like, but about 2 rows away on each side to give it consistency. And then once we have that done, I'm going to go back to this shading for solid, click on our square here that we've made for our leg, and then I'm going to use our tab key to go into edit mode, or alternatively you can go down here and go to edit mode here as well. I am then going to make sure I have the faces selected, grab our bottom face here, and then use our move tool to then move the face down to the ground level here. Once that's there, I'm going to go up to this little pivot point, and I'm going to go to individual origins and make sure that's selected. I'm then going to hit scale on this face to scale this to make it a little bit smaller and a little more petite. You can see now we have that table taper right there. Real easy. I'm also going to go up again into the wireframe view and go into this face and do the same thing just to make it a little bit smaller. And that's about probably where we want to be at. We can make this a little bit smaller. That's a little, don't do that. Oh boy, hold on, let me Control Z that real quick. Probably about there is good. I'm just being picky, but about there is good. Awesome. And now that we have that there, we can move on to making the other 3 legs just by duplicating them, which will be real straightforward and easy. So let me go ahead and hit tab here. Okay, so if we want to do a quick tab, so if I go out of object or out of edit mode into object mode, I'm then going to then do Shift D to duplicate that leg. And it seems like nothing happened because I haven't moved him yet. So I'm actually going to go into wireframe mode and then go back into the Z axis, and I'm going to move the new leg we've made, and you can see it pops right on out there. I'm going to do the same exact thing, move about 2 rows away from the edge. Perfect, awesome. So now I got him there, which is great. And you can see my other one kind of changed a little bit to where he's at. So I'm going to actually fix him a little bit, move him over a little bit farther. Down a little bit just because of the scaling we did. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift key to select both of them, and then I'm going to click Shift D again, which will actually duplicate both of them. And I'm going to just click again just to get out of that menu there, and then I'm going to use this arrow to move them along the x-axis and bring them over again 2 away from the edge on both sides of our tabletop. And now if we go back into our regular viewport shading, you can see we now have the table selected here, or not selected, but table made. So that's exactly how you'd make that table. Again, very, very simplistic. We're not adding any materials to this. You're welcome to if you'd like to add some color, but this is just kind of showing you how to model simplistic objects. Now, granted, you can see up here we have, our table. You can see it's kind of underneath here, and I'm going to actually, you can see there's a bunch of different cubes. Now if we want to, what we can do is we can actually join this all together to make it one object. So if I go in here and I hold down Shift and select each of our little columns we have in the top, to make this one conjoined object, I'm going to right click and then hit join, or alternatively Control J, and now it's all just one complete object that we can move around. And you can see now we click it, and we can move this as one table, similarly how I had my own. And that is how you make the table object. Alrighty, so now for our second object we're going to make, it's going to be this little chair. It's going to go with our table. As you can see, it doesn't really fit together. I suppose if you put it like this, it'll look like a better little scene. So you can see we're making a little dining scene here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the table. Well, not remove it, but hide it for the time being by unclicking this check mark. And now we have our chair here, so I'm going to show you guys how we're going to make this chair. If you want to give a crack at it yourself, a couple helpful tips, is E is to extrude in the edit mode, and then Control R is for loop cuts. So that'll be the only hints I give you for it, and go ahead and take a crack at that. Alrighty, and then if you unpause and come back, I'll show you how I made mine. So I'm going to do Shift A to add another object. I'm going to do a cube, and I'm going to scale this down with the S key there, give it about that size. Doesn't matter too much. And then I'm going to scale again in the Z axis, so S and then Z to scale it down and flatten it. So about there is probably good. And then I'm going to move it up in the Z axis by doing 1 again, like we did on our table, to move it up. That's over here in the transform properties. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on this guy and go into the edit mode up in here. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to make some loop cuts. So I'm going to do Control R, and you can see these little yellow lines appear. So it actually cuts our meshes, and I'm going to use the mouse wheel that I have, and when I scroll up it actually increases the amount of loop cuts I make. So I'm going to make 4, and then when I left click, I can left click twice to put it exactly where it is. If you left click once, you can move stuff around. If it just happens, then right click, and that'll put it right back to where it stops. It won't do any movement, and then you can just left click to make those cuts. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to do it again to show you anyway. So I'm going to do Control R to do a loop cut, this time in a different direction. I'm then going to use my mouse wheel to scroll up to 4, left click, right click, and then left click again, and to put it exactly where it's supposed to be. Now you can see with this little grid system going on. So what I want to do is actually want to move these loop cuts we've made. So to do that, I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and then I'm going to click on one of these loop cuts, and you can see it selects the entirety of the loop. I'm then going to hold down the Shift key and then click this one as well. So holding down Shift and Alt to select the second loop cut, and then I'm going to use the green cursor to move it toward the edge like so, leaving a little bit of a gap there. Doesn't have to be precise, just kind of close. I'm then going to do the same thing over here, so I'm going to do Alt click to select that loop cut, hold down Shift, do this loop cut, and do the same thing, green arrow to the y-axis and move it this way, leaving that gap there. Same thing with this one, so hold down Alt to select this, hold down Shift, red arrow this time to move it in the X, right about there, Same with the top one. Alt click, hold down Shift, red arrow, pull up. Perfect. Awesome. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use this for our legs. So I'm going to go below this here. I'm going to make sure I have my faces selected, or face tool selected. I'm then going to shift click each of these squares and then hit E to extrude. So I'm going to press the E key and I'm going to move them down here like this. And that's going to create our chair legs like that. And then we're going to go up here on the back side and I'm going to click this face and then shift click this face. Hit E to extrude, click, E to extrude, click, E to extrude, click, and then E to extrude. Now the reason I did that is that's going to help create our windows in the back there. And the way to do that is some of you would be tempted to go like this and then extrude into this face. The problem with that is you can see there's overlapping geometry there. Now I could try to be closer, more precise about it, but it just causes problems when rendering and it's just not a good practice to get into. So I'm going to Control Z that. So instead I'm going to select this face and then select the face across from it. And then I'm going to do Control E to go into the edge selection, and I'm going to do bridge edge loops. And that'll automatically connect it together and take care of those faces there. It'll be nice and clean of a join. So I'm going to do the same thing with the top one. I'm going to select this face and then shift select this face as well. And then I'm going to do Control E, go into the edge selection, bridge edge loops, and that'll select that there. And now you can see if we go back into the object mode, we have a little bit of a smaller chair, but we have a chair nonetheless. And that is how you make the chair we got going on. So if I put the table back in, I can now take this and rotate it 90 degrees if I'd like. Oh, probably do that in the C. There we go. And now we have a little dining set started. And there we go. Have our chair made. Okay, so now we're going to go to our third object, which is going to be this bottle here. Now, granted, I did not make this to be anything that's like a perfect bottle by any means. It's more of like a low polygonal bottle. But we'll again give you some hints to scale and extrude in this one. So go ahead and give that one a try. This one's real easy to make. Okay, and now that you're back, let's go ahead and make this bottle. So I'm going to do Shift A. I'm going to do a cylinder this time. If you want to, also, just as a quick note, when you make a cylinder, there's a little tab down here called Add Cylinder. You can change the vertice count. I kept that one at 32, but I'm going to make this one 16 just to show you the difference. Gives it a little more of a chunky look. So now I have that there. I am then going to go ahead and I'm going to scale this guy down real small. About there is probably fine. I'm then going to go and click on one of the preset viewports up here, the Y-axis, to kind of move this guy up on the grid to make sure he's on the table. Get him right about there. It's a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and shrink him down with the scale again. Go a little bit smaller, make him a bit of a thinner bottle. Make sure he's sitting on the table. Okay, perfect. I'm going to move this one over, get a little more dynamics to it. Why not? Then we go ahead and go into the edit mode here. I'm going to make sure I have my faces selected. Just click there. I'm going to click on this face on the top, and I'm going to do a scale inward with the S key. So I'm going to scale and move in, and then I'm going to hit E to extrude. Click there, scale again in. E to extrude. Scale again in. And then I'm going to E to extrude going up like this. Now granted, mine does not look the same as the one I made earlier, but that's totally fine. So now to make that lid there, what I'm going to do, which is really cool, is I'm going to actually do E to extrude but not move. I'm actually just going to click, and it looks like nothing happened, but I actually did make an extrusion there. You just can't really see it. It's just because I'm the same exact face level. But now what I can do is, now that I have that extrusion, I'm going to hit S to scale that extrusion, and that's going to come out to about maybe here. And now, with that selected, I'm going to do E to extrude again to go up, make that cap. And now that I have that there, I'm going to actually use the Inset Faces tool, which I actually can't reach because of the recording windows there. Let me move that over if I can. Not sure if I can get out of that or not. So I got my little recording window here. It's got this little button tabbed up. It's right over top of my Inset tool. Let me see if I can get that. If I can reach it. It's embarrassing. Here, 1 second. Alright, so I'm not able to click that, but a quick shortcut for it is just I. So I have my selected face there. I'm going to hit I, and then I can move this little circle inward. If I can just get that. It's a little tricky. Let's see here, come on. Gotta drag the cursors a little bit farther. Can't seem to get it. Come on now. There we go. Okay, so if I go about there, then I can do E to extrude and actually go down, and now you can see we have a hollowed-ish bottle. It's not entirely hollowed out, but you know, it's there, which is pretty cool. And now we have bottles, and you can make several of these if you want to. Just kind of play around with the extrusions and the shrinking around, stuff like that, to make these different little bottles around the table, which is pretty cool. So we pretty much almost got our diner set entirely complete. Okay, and for our last object we're going to make is we're going to make a bowl. So obviously a little bit of a different looking object there, but again, I will give you guys some tips. So I would suggest using a cylinder to start, extrude and loop cuts as well, and inset faces are all used on this object. Okay, so now that you've paused and come back, I will go ahead and show you how you can make this bowl yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Shift A, and I'm going to, again, as I mentioned, I'm going to go into doing a cylinder. I'm going to hit this one at 32. I mentioned it before with the bottle, you can do it at 16. I'm going to do it at 32 this time, so I'm going to click out of that. I'm then going to go ahead and I'm going to scale this guy down real small. So I'm going to move over to here to the viewport. It's probably about there, and then I'm going to scale him to Z, make him real little, about there, and then I'm going to go ahead and use the cursors to grab and move him. And again, if I need to get him right on top of that table, make sure he's nice and lined up. That's pretty close. It's pretty good. Okay, so now we're there. We got our object here. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the edit mode, and I'm going to first start by extruding a face off the top there, and I'm going to try to make it about that tall. After I make this one a little bit shorter, actually, I'll go about there, and then I'm going to scale that up, and you can see we kind of have an interesting pointy looking bowl here. But the way we can do this is if we go and we do Control R to make a loop cut, we can put this here and make sure I can scale this guy. So let me go ahead and make sure I cancel the movement, but I can do an Alt select around there, and I can do a scaling of the movement. Now I could do this for every single segment, but to make this faster, if I do, while this is selected, if I do Control B, this will actually bevel, and now I can move this up, and it'll make this a lot smoother. Now I can actually use my mouse wheel as well. If I scroll up, it'll make more segments for the bevel to make this a real smooth transition. And now you can see, if I unselect that, we get this nice smooth bowl look there. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back to my face selection, go back to the top. I'm going to click I to inset faces. I'm going to go in just a little bit. And now we have another face there. I'm going to do E to extrude, and I'm going to extrude this down through. Now this is going to look a little weird at first. I'm going to go down to about the surface of the table, right about there at the bottom, and you can see it a little bit there in the center. I'm then going to scale immediately. I'm not going to touch anything else. I'm going to scale, and you can see it's scaling in. It's going to look a little weird, but I'm going to probably move it right about here. I'm going to do another Control R to make another loop cut right in the center. I'm then going to scale that loop cut with S once it's placed out, and you can see it's kind of a little weird spot. You kind of put it right about here-ish. We're going to make sure it's not crossing over any mesh as much as possible. And right about there, and then I'm going to Control B to bevel that. And I'm going to move that on up to make that as seamless as we can. So maybe right about, this is not as good looking as the other one was, but right about maybe there perhaps would be good. Cover that all up. And now if we go back into object mode, we have ourselves a pretty nice looking bowl. And there we go, and there you have it. What's cool too is you can go in these objects and you can scale these down to make them a little bit smaller too, to make them a little more dynamic if you want. Just make sure they stay on top of your table. But there we go. So play around with this. Now you have some decent tips on how to low poly model. So play around, make your own little dining set if you want. You have bottles, chairs, and tables. You can move these all around and scale them as you like. Make some new objects, maybe do some homework and do some, knives and forks or spoons maybe, just to try out your skills with it. But yeah, there you go. So that's how you do some basic low poly modeling.